Okay, everybody, welcome to our community call from the Integral Dojo. This community call is called Aikido Sessions, which is based on a seminar that I'm going to be teaching together with Thorsten Schoo Sensei, Cassidy Sensei in Frankfurt, Germany, in the end of November, beginning of December, I believe. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit towards the end of this call. But let me first open. I'll start with Thorsten. I'll open Thorsten's mic. Yours too, Patrick. And just a quick introduction, Thorsten Schoo Sensei is a six-time Aikido teacher who has a dojo at the Seishinkan. Did I say that right, Thorsten?
Right.
Seishinkan Dojo in Seishinkai, yeah, right, I always get that wrong. Seishinkai Dojo and organization in Frankfurt, Germany. And we're also joined today with my old friend and teaching buddy, Patrick Cassidy Sensei, also a sixth dan. He has a dojo in Montreux, Aikido Montreux, in Montreux, Switzerland. And I'm Miles from Tel Aviv. And welcome, Patrick. Welcome, Thorsten.
Thank you, Miles. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. You know, I got some little kids running around in the background here, so it might they might pop in soon, but doing good.
And it's good to see Thorsten. It's nice to have the opportunity to work with you both, and looking forward to how the conversation turns out today. And we're really going into the unknown. It's a jiwaza because we have done no preparation prior to this call.
I'm
just to let everybody know.
I'm looking forward to practicing teaching with you in the end of November. And of course, this is a great opportunity to prepare for us. Actually, I have no idea how this will work out and what ideas will pop up. Actually, we have two thoughts, right? The one is I am that. And the other one was next steps. Yeah, like Patrick, you suggested. What are our next steps? I find this also very interesting.
Great. So why don't we start with I am that? Because I am that is specifically from the Patrick. Patrick, why don't you take this? I got a little noise behind.
All right.
I am that.
I am that is actually a very famous statement from Nisargadatta Maharaj, who wrote the book I Am That. But it's speaking about that universal experience that all great spiritual leaders, great spiritual visionaries, including O Sensei, had stated upon their awakening, the realization that I am that, and that meaning the universal context of our experience. And in meditation or in great moments of shifting of consciousness, individuals can come and have that direct taste of what that may mean. And this is the fundamental, from my perspective, I think we share that, is a fundamental perspective that informed O Sensei's creation of Aikido. But Thorsten, you're the one who brought up the statement. So perhaps maybe you could elucidate a little bit more what that means for you directly, and how you relate that statement to your practice of Aikido.
So, when the traditional way of studying and doing martial arts kind of breaks down, or kind of is coming to an end, kind of the traditional martial art, like your fixed forms and techniques and the foreseeable outcome kind of evaporates because of you understood all these techniques and all these kind of simple strategies and structures. Something new pops up, and I find that very natural. So kind of an architecture which is very used, like this traditional concept of a martial art, of a traditional approach to Aikido, breaks down in a way, and that happened to me kind of 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago, maybe even longer. So it breaks down, and then there's a void, and the thing is, what comes next? Do you substitute, the architecture, the old building, with a new one, or what are you going to do? So this is kind of we're not sure what to do, maybe, and I think that's very natural. It's kind of a natural process, like things like evolving in waves. And for me, actually, because I'm very much influenced by the concepts of a Russian martial art, a systema called, where you work with breath, breathing, different types of systems within the body, like your heartbeat, your tension or your relaxation, your tissue, and so on. So these things. So for me, I would say like the old approach to traditional Aikido transformed itself into a kind of a conceptual, into an art with a more dominated by a conceptual approach. You know? And these concepts are ideas like, which are much more profound than a technique in itself. So it's not like A, B, you get attacked and you find a different answer and you're kind of good in these these answers, like you kind of, you know, like an artist. It's just you're within. It's more like I feel in daily life. I feel like being like swimming in the water. You know, I'm really swimming in a river or swimming in a kind of, you know, things happen and I'm not always the master of what happens, you know, but I'm getting more flexible and more more adaptable to things, to situations, to people, and to the future in general. So things are melting in a way. So all these concepts about, you know, how Aikido should be, how I should be, how the world should be, maybe kind of melts, and then the thing is, with whom or with what kind of ideas you connect again. So it's really different. Now.
So if I hear you correctly, Thorsten, I get the feeling that or what I'm hearing is that you're experiencing kind of a deconstruction of your in the last number of years. You've been going through a deconstruction of all the technical models that you've identified as Aikido, and as well as all the perhaps the conceptual models that you had used to kind of inform all that techniques, and you're finding yourself in a much more free flow state with regards to who you are and what you're doing. And is that where this phrase for you is coming up? I am that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this goes together with a deep relaxation. So my experience is my daily experience, and also in the long run. So when I look at myself, if it is possible, like from a distant point of view, I'm getting more and more relaxed in deeper levels. And my experience is really that the more you relax inside, really deep inside, the easier it is. Or I mean, it just happens by itself that you are connected to the so-called outside in a very different way. Mm-hmm. So what is outside, or what maybe one time in the past has been something outside,
right,
is not outside anymore.
Is not outside anymore. Yeah. So there's a shift in the way we relate to our experience.
Yeah. And this is, of course, this changes everything. I mean, I think this is a very, very, very deep thing. So I didn't choose it kind of deliberately, like as a theme in my meditation or in my work. It just happens. Just occurring, and I'm, there is these waves, and it's every day is different, but I'm how to say, there is sometimes a deep joy in this, that you feel, or that I feel, I am that too. You know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See that, for example, you travel, you travel, and you go to kind of, you're flying to somewhere, and then you kind of prospect, how will it be, or some people, or what, and then, but if you feel already that you're there, this is a totally different story then. So other things happen. So it's not kind of an opposition, so that you travel from A to B and then you see what happens. So you're already there, and I think that's a very that happens to me all the time these last months, and in the martial art, in Aikido. So if you enlarge your space, maybe you could call it owning the space in a different way. So that I own that space, which is much bigger than my body or my, even the room I'm practicing in. So, and all these other kind of human beings, these partners, are inside that room, which you feel, and that's a very great thing. The door opens, which is I was reading many books about things, but now what happens is that I really experience. I think I experience in a way. I could not imagine before. So yeah,
Well, I
maybe.
think what I'm again, you're expressing a large context, and I
Yeah,
just want to kind of get in touch with what you're approaching, and I think with Miles, please chime in here when you feel inspired to do so. But when I get the, you know, for me, the phrase "I am that"
yeah,
be referred to can be a statement that comes out of a realization of a universal experience that seems to have no limit, and that experience, whatever that may be, can be in touch with kind of different dimensions of our of being. And one is that sense of I am that which is beyond idea. I am that which is beyond
yeah,
my story. I am
mm,
that which is beyond or prior to time and prior to all the definitions and concepts and every identification that my mind has grown accustomed to. And
mm,
prior to all of this, I am that, and it is a statement of experiencing something prior to our our movement in time. And there's also this experience, and I think this is what you're referring to, is that state of realizing the world around us and what we perceive, and all of what we perceive and our experience of that is one large context, and I'm not separate from that, and
yeah,
I'm with that in a certain sense. I am that too.
yeah,
I am I am that which is prior to the world, and I am the world as well. And I think that informs directly our capacity to respond to that world, because
yeah,
in the meditative world of the realization of being that space prior to our story, uh, that that's an enlightened or an awakening experience, but it doesn't necessarily inform our relationship. But what I think you're referring to is that kind of opening up to our environment in a way that I feel no more separation. I am already
yeah,
there, as you put it, and that this unity is informing my response. This unity is directly informing my response rather than a separate notion
yeah,
of of myself.
yeah,
I'm allowing my my understanding, my experience, to be informed by a larger context that I'm starting to
yeah.
realize I am that. Is this kind of correct in
Yeah,
what
oh,
I'm trying to?
that's very, very good explanation. So and the I mean, we communicate that even if we don't talk, right? So the beginning of the story, or kind of a happening, or like an encounter in martial arts and Aikido, is it's way before that things decide themselves. So the where do things where are the things starting? Like where's the beginning, or the initiation of the initial movement? So it's you can track back and back and back and back. So
Mhm.
with the more relaxed state, like I'm maybe it's more the emotional body, or I'm not here, I'm not professional, but my experience is like the more I relax inside, I track back, the beginning of the stories, or the things what's going to happen. That's what I wanted to try to explain with that phrase, like owning the space. When you're more like maybe the day before, or things like what last week, something is still there, and it's kind of working inside, and you were training in the dojo, something, and then this is a very large space, which is so there's not the walls anymore, like the dojo, the inside and the outside, kind of. Then you're going home and to something else. So it's kind of connected to many.
Could you speak a little bit more about what you mean by owning the space?
I last yesterday night in the dojo. So we were training with sticks,
Mhm.
and you kind of you move you move that staff, and it was a short one, very easy to handle, like with one hand and with two hands, and kind of we started kind of stroking. What is that? Touching the other one just with that stick, that wooden stick. So in order to do that, they needed to completely relax their fingers, elbows, hands, wrists. And so it was such a nice, so people were just, they were just moving and they're just touching the body of their partner. And they were so fluid inside, so that, when they did then afterwards, like a Jew was, like, you do something and the other one is kind of responding, the kind of the reaction, which I know from myself too, somebody takes your toy and you don't like it, you don't want to give it away. So, but with that, expanded space, like this, for example, a group of 5, that's what I feel. This is just what happened yesterday, just as an example. It's just,
so if I understand what you're saying is that in that expanded space, where you feel that you are owning that space, as you said, that this kind of distinction between what is mine and what is yours kind of dissolves, and there's
no. Okay. Let me explain it in a different way. So somebody's taking the stick, okay? So, and then if you kind of just you and your ideas, I want to kind of win, I want to bring it to an end. So then you're frustrated. You don't want to give it away. But if you own that space, if that space is bigger and everybody is kind of part of it. Still, if the stick moves from one partner to another, it's still inside that space. And if you own that space, it's still yours, so the frustration is not there. So the body is much more...
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, in the sense that what I feel you're pointing to is the sense of that kind of contracted relationship with our environment, and the feeling of losing, as in the stick or the staff that you're working with, is lost, is the contraction is gone, as you realize that whatever is in the space that you're perceiving is still connected to you, still part of you. So that kind of loss of that stick, or the contraction against the loss of that stick, of that staff, is released, as there's no disconnection, even if the person takes the stick. Is this what I'm picking up? Is that?
I mean, if it's kind of, let's say you leave the key on the table, just on this table here, but it's your home. You go into another room, you come back, you take the key again. So it's still your space. It's still the place you're familiar with. So that's just an example on a very practical.
So let me ask you this: in relationship, from that perspective of owning the space and being at home in that space, the way I refer to it is being at home in that space.
Yeah.
How do you relate to uke, or how do you relate to your partner?
I mean, so for me, the crucial thing is, like, if the partner is still within that bigger space, is the partner, if we are one, like we were Myers, and we did like the movers. Miles, how was it, the theme of our seminar? Be two, move as one, right?
We two move as one, right?
Yeah, so be two, move as one. So we cannot be one, but we're of course we're two, but we can move as one. Moving as one, requires some, really feeling inside of it, as you feel from the inside of the other one in a way. So you have to connect on a deeper complex.
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, what you're pointing to is if in my experience, if there's that sense of expansion into the space, and that feeling being at home in that space, and to a certain degree, from a spiritual perspective, and from a neurological perspective, our perception is our world, and we contain that perception. We contain that perception because in order to process perception, we have to invite it in. And so that perception is that space that I feel that you're referring to, and that larger perception includes the other. And ideally for myself, if I'm truly at home in that space, I feel like I'm able to welcome the other in that space. And that sense of welcoming is what I think you're referring to as being able to feel the other, to include the other, which is the preliminary stages for that sense of that experience of we, that we state where the unity of self and other become a larger context, and that moves in a way itself. And in that movement, we are both contained in that context. And from my experience, it's Nage who is facilitating that. It's Nage who's opening that space up and welcoming Uke into that. And then the unity of that movement, the unity of that relationship can show up in a jiwaz or in movement, in communal movement, as you were describing. Obviously, what you were working on in your last collaboration with Miles, it's that you described it very well. And I think that's another point where we can say, I am that, right?
Yeah.
I am that movement.
Yeah.
I am that movement that includes us both. I am that movement which is beyond my own individual state, but a larger relational state. I am that we. I am I, but I'm also that we that I'm experiencing consciously with this other person. I don't know. I don't mean to put words into your mouth, but that's what I'm thinking.
It's a very good description of what I feel, actually. So so it was not a problem in a way, but I was kind of surprised that, it was so strong. So when I first realized that, kind of that it became a habit or became kind of a normal daily feeling, like that, space is bigger and, this and that, and yesterday, and 10 years maybe ahead. So this is all connected. So this feeling kind of slowed me down. I'm from it's like what is your next goal? What is your next coming, maybe preparing that question of what is our next steps.
Sorry, what was it exactly that you felt slowed you down?
This being in that greater context, bigger context, so just like maybe this is often people are talking about, being a drop, feeling like the drop in the ocean becomes conscious in a way. So you feel kind of being a part of the bigger thing. Then it's really it's a great thing, and it's everything in itself. So where to go now? Do you know what I mean? Where I'm pointing to?
So could you say something more about that slowing down? What that slowing down was experienced or recognized by you?
Some like very, very simple things. It's personal. I still like cars, for example. I like cars. Being driving cars. Knowing things about cars or motorbikes. Devices which bring you very fast from one point to another. Like you decide to go there. Nearly immediately you're there. So, and it's very complex, very technical, and these things. And if you allow me this as a metaphor for the daily, for your life, you try to execute this idea, and you plan it and you structure it, and then you go for it. So this this active part of the thing, this slowed down because I felt so rich inside. I mean, still feeling so rich inside, even more and more. So why bother about these things? So and then this is a very, very I think for me actually it's an important question.
But how does that, if I could ask, how does that translate over into your Aikido? What is that experience of that within your Aikido itself?
So the question, the question is still Aikido is because when you in the Aikido, the soft Aikido, the contact Aikido, or like these things, you're like being in harmony already, and then kind of playing or moving within that context of harmony. The question still is there: what is the martial aspect of is Aikido still a martial art for me? So that's a question right up again. In the beginning when I started, for me it was a very elegant, but it was a martial art. So it's kind of, so it's not the biggest thing, but it is still a question I have in my mind. So not in the sense could I defend myself against somebody? No, not this level. But so is it does it make sense? These new movements biomechanically, you know, in a martial way of thinking, does this make sense or not? So it's not that, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't mean that I don't do it, but I want to make sure for myself, so is that in that martial context a meaningful movement or an attitude? So to bring it down to to one phrase, it's like, what am I fighting for? You know, am I fighting still? So I'm not fighting against myself. I try not to do, you know, don't try to fight against the partner already, because this is already included in, you know, if we own our space. So this is already where we're going on the next level, but still, do we fight, and for what? So I think it's a very important question, and to find answers for that.
I think what you're pointing to is kind of the evolution of an individual's motivation or inspiration to engage in the practice itself.
Yeah.
And obviously for most of us as martial artists, we begin with that desire for personal safety, but as we start to advance in the practice, the larger questions start to appear as being fundamentally much more rich and sustaining in terms of what we're doing, what
hopefully
that my practice is on.
Hopefully those questions are not always the case.
No, but I think I think a person feels that, but what they go with, you know,
I agree.
where they go with it, that will be dependent on them.
Well, also does the cultural context allow that?
Yeah.
Because it's a cultural story. I mean, Thorsten was talking about this, you know, it at a certain point he wasn't satisfied. He had to kind of break free of the old structures, the old culture. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy at all. And it takes a commitment to something. It takes a huge leap of faith to do that. Right. And I because, you know, in that, if we look at it, you know, if we look at kind of what you and Thorsten were talking about, first apologies about not being able to participate so much because of my daughter, but I'm so happy I can just leave it to you guys. That's great. But if you make that, when you make that move from a martial art, like, you know, physical, kind of very dualistic, there's somebody over there, and just because of me and self and the other, there's going to be fear, and there's always going to be this boundary thing. And is it, you know, that's the realm of martial arts. But when you start to shift into something more subtle, that relaxes, and it can still be within a martial dialogue. Aikido should be within a martial dialogue. But if you keep taking that further to the point where, like Thorsten says, it feels like swimming, you know, the I am that place where self and other in a way collapse, or they begin to interpenetrate.
Yeah.
Which is another thing, because, you know, if to connect so deeply with somebody, that means that you have to allow them to connect deeply with you. You have to allow them, their presence, their being to penetrate you to the point of where you actually experience them as yourself and yourself as them, no boundaries, no difference. But that's not easy for martial artists to do, because martial artists are out there, you know, using their skills to kind of be safe and keep it out there. So if we don't relax to a certain extent, you can still have everything in a martial dialogue. That's great. Let's have it in a martial dialogue. But when you make that shift out of the martial stand into, let's say, a martial dialogue, and you keep taking it, quite naturally, it'll all relax. And when it relaxes in us, miraculously, the conflict relaxes in the other as well.
Right, right. Because it's a shared state, and that shared state where we move within that relationship influences the total. It's not something that we can control, but it's something that's part of that system. And that unity of that realization of that unity is actually, to a certain degree, what you're pointing to, Miles, and I think what you're speaking about, Thorsten, is that actually the challenges, the previous challenges of keeping kind of a guard up, and that skillful, strategic approach to self-defense takes courage and a certain level of involvement. But these larger questions about how do I realize the nature of who I am and my relationship with the other, and allow that to evolve into new territory, takes a tremendous amount of courage and a lot of willingness to take risks in a way which is different than the kind of the strategic approach to technical martial arts. We start looking at addressing our existential type of questions. And the challenges around that are quite extraordinary because it starts to deconstruct our ideas about reality. And that's a big thing. That's a very big thing.
Yeah, I agree. So for me, it was kind of, I always have been very curious about, things, when I did the traditional kind of education as becoming an Aikido teacher, that you have all these skills, I would say in the beginning, I was not really interested in like street fight, street combat, defending myself, I did not begin the practice and the studies because of that. I started actually, for me, my idea from the very first beginning was freedom. So I felt that, this type of movement, I felt something inside. So this is I have to continue to do that because I felt from the very first session, actually, the very first class, I felt this is there's something I really want to go deeper into. And that was, my feeling was kind of pointing towards freedom, what I understood those days. So actually that was my reason. And then of course, as a young guy, you start, some friend is doing karate and somebody's doing kung fu and stuff. And then you talk to each other and then you ask yourself, of course. But for me, the fighting aspect in the art of Aikido was very early, all these structures, your stance, your hang stance, you start from you learn positions, you learn how to structure yourself and you stand there and then you start moving, as a structure. And this of course becomes more and more refined, but in itself, it's kind of a jail. It's kind of a prison, These structures in themselves it's an architecture which could be closed. So, and we close it ourselves. If we just do we close the doors, all these doors ourselves. So there was a few years in my life and my career as Aikido teacher where I completely looked at the other side, just the free movement, the letting go everything, and no techniques at all, And then if a technique happens, of course, this is a technique, but the feeling of it, or also the value of it, was kind of completely different. I said, okay, this is the right path. For me, it was a good choice to do that. So letting go, but the beginning was out of curiosity. It was not a thing that I kind of felt anxiety or it takes of much courage for me. I just did it because I was curious, and step by step,
I think what you're pointing to, what I refer to is as distinguishing the difference between practicing Aikido, practicing martial arts as a path of power, or power being either physical power or some form of understanding the capacity to control our environment, to impact our environment, and the practicing martial arts or practicing Aikido as a path of freedom. And freedom meaning an awakening and abidance as a larger context, a larger connection with life itself. And those two paths, although are similar, they're not necessarily the same. And I always, in my experience, there's a lot of power that goes with the path of freedom, but power comes and goes, and power will eventually go. We will lose power at a certain point in time in our lives with regards to our physical status as we age and we become closer to death. Physical power is a limited experience.
A diminishing return.
Exactly.
How do you relate freedom and physical power?
Well, freedom, in my direct experience, the differentiation between trying to train for power and letting the training be a catalyst for a deeper exploration of freedom, there was a tremendous amount of power that showed up that was quite available, that wasn't there before. And yet I realized that the power wasn't the point. The power was just bonus. It comes with the territory, and it's going to go, and it's going to come, and it's going to go, and it's not something that is necessarily important to kind of hold on to, as the intention starts to go towards a greater what I would say three things: a greater freedom,
Yeah.
a greater integration,
Mm.
and a greater capacity to evolve the system. So freedom I associate with an awakening that I am that, as you brought up, that realization that I am not separate from the world around me, and everybody has access to this realization. It is a fundamental nature of who we all are, and it doesn't take any time to realize that. It just
and it's the fundamental nature of what Aikido is, according
exactly.
to
Yes. And that's the ground for where Aikido was born. And then there's the capacity to integrate the system that we are, the body, the heart, and the mind of our system, and to also look into the shadow and the unconscious natures of our system, and be able to welcome the totality of that system as we realize we're not contained in it. In a certain sense, it's contained within us. Mm-hmm. And then the capacity to integrate stimulates the capacity to evolve, where the system starts to take on new qualities, it starts to move into new territory based on the realization of non-separation with the world and an integrated experience of itself. And so these three things, for me, that's the quality of a different path that is empowered. There's no doubt there's capacity and skill and the reflection of that in our lives, but the power is not the primary purpose of the training. It becomes something else as a direct line for awakening, living an integrated or integral life, and evolving into the next step. That, and I feel very much that Aikido is a great catalyst for stimulating people to move into the next step of their lives, where there's their individual states or a collective state in terms of our humanity.
I was this morning very early. I was running at home, and I kind of a few kilometers, so it took a while, and I came into my mind. I was just breathing, like very steadily, like in and out, and 4 steps in and out, and it kind of it's I like it very very much, because there's more, that oxygen and that rhythm, very like swimming also, and I was thinking or feeling that the oxygen, the things I'm inhaling, the trees are exhaling in a way, so there is this nature and the fog. It was very early in the morning, and it was such a just this. It was completely. It was kind of perfect. I felt that perfection, inhaling perfection. So that was my feeling while running. And I'm so thankful for these kind of, this was just great, very big space. And then, owning the space the feeling was like, wow, this is, what a gift, early in the morning. And so, this is, but if you, in order to continue, from kilometer 5 or so, you get tired, and so to relax completely, find your structure. This is very interesting, finding the structure, like hanging spine and moving very, very easily and being light, relax the hips and all the joints. And I had the feeling that I was being nourished by all which surrounded me, but which I felt inside too. So it's maybe an explanation for how I'm not, and this was a powerful experience, for example. But me personally, I was so tired. I was kind of weak and exhausted a little bit, and then opening up even more. It's kind of like, just to explain how I feel these days.
What I think you're pointing to is the shift in relationship that occurs when we start to open ourselves up to this larger context, this deeper reality of ourselves. Mm. And specifically for me, I think that I see that reflected within the Aikido practice, is that kind of grateful relationship to the challenges I'm facing in the practice, grateful relationship to uke, a grateful relationship to the exploration, and a grateful relationship to the challenge of moving into new territory. Mm-hmm. And that the pressure that comes from uke, the intensity, the energy, the attack, is something that actually is the fundamental building blocks and nutrition for that process that we're all on. That capacity to move into new territory is stimulated, informed by uke, and we suddenly are realizing this grateful nature to our experience, and if we could do that with uke and realize that perfection that you spoke about, I think that opens us up to what O Sensei was referring to, is the realization that in Aikido there is no enemy, because the whole world supports my process of discovery. The whole world supports my process of evolution, and of course, it doesn't mean I'm a victim to aggression, but rather I'm in that owning that space, being at home in that space. I can welcome what is in that space as an opportunity to move into new territory, as an opportunity to become more at home with myself.
Yeah, and that's only experience from that space. Is my mic on? Yeah. Sorry about the background noise, but that's only experience from that space where you have the felt experience, the actual intersubjective experience of I am that. The self and other are kind of deeply connected in oneness. And Patrick and I have done this quite a bit, but it kind of there's like 3 moves to make, probably more, but you go from where I do Aikido on the other person, I do my techniques on them, they attack, and that's the whole martial realm. I try to control my daughter, so to speak, to a place where we start to do Aikido, and we start to do Aikido with our partner, which is starting to move that way, but it can still be, kind of in that martial self-other place, to the big move, the big jump, which, to be honest, it's like Patrick said, we always have access to it. It's always there. It's our nature. It's Aikido's nature. Oh, sorry. But the big move is to where I do Aikido as the partnership, where what Patrick was just saying, my moves, my response to my partner, to the attack, is informed by the other person. It's not informed by my thought process or my historical understanding of Aikido, or one of the thousands of techniques I've done in the past that I reach into a folder and I pull it out and I decide to apply it to my partner. We do that. We repeat the past quite a bit. But it's informed by what's arising in the moment.
Yes, it's informed by the partner, it's informed by the relationship, it's informed by the context. And
it's fundamentally holistic with the quote unquote attack, which completely neutralizes, I shouldn't say neutralize, it changes the nature of the relationship.
Transforms it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that ability to recognize that is that ability to meet conflict without separation, without the walls that we normally build between self and other as a way to protect ourselves. And that's a radically challenging experience, to walk into conflict with the walls down so that I'm experiencing the other more deeply, rather than the walls up where
you have to fundamentally be willing to do that, which is a big ask for most people.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of courage.
It only happened at a certain point in his training that he started to let that go, even though he wasn't looking for that at the beginning. It kind of happened as a natural, let's say, maturation of your training. I know Patrick as well. I know Patrick a long time. Kind of the same thing, me, the same thing. But it took time. And I wasn't in a context, and I know Patrick wasn't in a context, and I assumed that Thorsten wasn't in a context that was encouraging us to do that. But my teachers weren't saying, let go, drop your boundaries, be open. Oops, sorry.
So I think there is a challenge. I think even in the context of supportive context that we all find ourselves, and I would include everybody, obviously, on this call and beyond, to face with that challenge of letting the walls down in order to be fundamentally connected and intimate with the world around us in such a way that the world directly informs us about where we, you, and this all want to go. And we become collaborators with that movement. We participate with that movement. We don't control it, but we're able to somehow facilitate and contribute our voices to the movement in such a way that it feels authentic and feels true for true for us. And at least that's my experience in the best of times. Now, that's not necessarily all the time, but in the best of times, there's that realization, hey, this is a much larger thing that's happening, and I only have a small piece to contribute, but I'm able to connect with the totality of it, and that freedom actually is my ability to contribute to that movement in a way that feels true and good and beautiful for the whole. And that's what it gets very exciting. Aikido becomes a doorway for that. And I think that's what you're referring to, Thorsten, in terms of what you're experiencing in those beautiful moments, like you mentioned, running and the realization of that perfection of the moment, that we get to, it's what I experience. It's like, I'm not perfect, but I'm part of something that is perfect.
Yeah,
and the realization of that, being part of something that is perfect, suddenly I realize perfection. But it's not me. It's not Patrick's not
perfection.
No, yeah. But it's that this event is perfect, and its totality is perfect.
Yeah, and it's the absence of ourselves that kind of what do you say, that reveal the perfection.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to open up. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, Patrick. I just want, we have 10 minutes left, and I'm wondering if we want to take some questions. What I'll do is I'll invite anybody out there. You want to ask a question, raise your hand by pushing the hand raising mechanism on the bottom of your window. There's a participants button. Click that. It'll pop open. You'll see like a place to raise your hand. Raise your hand, and we'll open up your mic and ask if you have a question to ask. Please bring your questions. Otherwise, Thorsten, Patrick, you can carry on because nobody's raising their hands yet. Okay, wait. Annette is raising her hands. Good. So I'll open Annetta's mic. So please, if anybody else has a question, let us know, and then we'll bring you in. Annetta.
Yes. Hi, Miles, and hi, Thorsten. Hi, Patrick. So it's wonderful to hear the three of you exchanging and exploring. And my question is, I wonder, what would you suggest in a very short sentence to someone who wants to start Aikido today, if he hears about this perspective? What is the most important thing for that person in the training to start with?
Somebody wants to answer first?
No.
Actually, if somebody shows up tomorrow night and would ask me this question, I would answer like, what you experience yourself in your own skin could be interesting. But if you experience something which is out of your skin, like you experience something together, has much more quality, and maybe it's kind of more real. So if you're looking for reality, if you're looking for truth, if you're looking for something which is meaningful for you, begin with that path of connecting to other people, connecting to other dimensions of reality, because then you enlarge what you feel and how you experience yourself in space, in the world. I think it's if you're interested, if you're curious enough to find out who you really are, that could be an interesting path for you.
I would include in the past I've had people come up and ask, what is Aikido, and to describe it to somebody who's never experienced it before. And one spontaneous response that came out was for a couple of gentlemen visiting the dojo was, well, Aikido is the martial art you would use if you were fighting somebody that you loved. If you were to fight with I said, if you were fighting somebody that you loved, if you were in a fight with your brother, and you were in a fight with somebody that you cared about, and you needed to be able to fundamentally honor the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what I would point to. And then I would say, in my experience, the force that comes from that motivation, the strength that comes from that motivation is much stronger than the strength that comes from the desire to destroy. And that for me is Aikido. And if that intrigues you, then you're in the right place. And if it doesn't, then that's okay too. But that for me is the context of the exploration. That makes sense? Yep.
And, for me, I've got my hands quite full here, so you have to forgive me, but it kind of depends on who's asking, and it's more of an intuitive thing. So I was speaking about those three ways of doing Aikido, doing your Aikido on another person, doing Aikido with another person, doing Aikido as the relationship, like what Patrick just said, doing Aikido with someone you love, like now. If I find somebody is completely, let's say, living from that place where it's me versus you, in a way I would try to affirm that, but then show them that there's a way that we can do things together, that we can actually work with each other. If I find that somebody's in that place where they're energetically, they're a bit more mature in their movement and relating with people, then I would work with them there, but encourage them that there's a place that we can come into this kind of wholeness where we can work in this I am that. So in a way, my basic guideline is meet them where they're at, but don't leave them where they're at. So, affirm where they're at, and then suggest, demonstrate.
Basically, you do Aikido with them.
Yeah, right. Aikido with their level.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Of course, it's so important to get to know who is showing up and what type of person is this. Of course, the distillation for me, actually, the distillation is if somebody, I would say, like if you just join the class, and if you have fun, I mean, on a maybe deeper level, you find it joyful, then it's a good thing for you. If you don't find it joyful, if it's not fun, no fun for you at all, then it's not the right thing. So the fun factor is very important. In a way, it's not Aikido is not for me at least. It's not the only way of kind of suffering and then trying to transform yourself into a thing. It's hard work and stuff, and the fun thing should be always there. And it's I forgot to mention.
Miriam?
Okay. Maybe the answer was just found because I recognize that where I came from, there was no joy first. There was just need. And I would have stayed no matter what would have happened, because I was expecting to be saved, which has happened. But so maybe the perspective is a bit wider. So I would like to hear something about that too.
In my first experience with Aikido, and I didn't necessarily consider it to be fun per se. I'd done a lot of judo beforehand, but I did consider, as you say, Miriam, I recognized something in the path that was necessary. It was like, okay, this is a path that my life wants or my life needs, and it became immediately reflected, and that's the direction that I wanted to go, even though the commitment really didn't hit for 1 or 2 years later. The recognition, wow, this is very valuable, was obvious. Yeah. And even to the point where moving to Japan and training in Iwama, and I recognized that the training was very hard, physically very demanding, a lot of pain, a lot of injury, but at the same time I connect with something deeper, which felt that this was was leading me to an authentic place. It wasn't the destination I wanted to land in, but it was the process that I wanted to move through, and that for me was something that I felt was recognized, and I felt, okay, I'm in the right place at the right time, and that was important. Thorsten, maybe you can take it from there.
Actually, there are some days. I mean, I'm not. I have been. There are darks. There is really some. There is a time when it can be very dark. When you don't see any light. Maybe no hope, or you're completely frustrated or depressed. Or these like a dark shadows. It can even be totally dark. I mean, so this is not easy to. The only thing which is when I'm talking about fun and stuff, it's not kind of that I enjoy as an ego, like I like this and just want to have this again. I mean that enjoying, or like the surfing thing. You surf, you kind of you just decide to do surfing. You surf and you surf on that wave. You catch the wave and you surf on that. And of course, it's there is an end in that movement, in that action itself. Some days you drop down and you drown maybe. So and then but you have this experience that it was a very complex and wonderful and beautiful thing. Standing on that board maybe, and then enjoying the path in a way. So and then you drop down and maybe you're completely under the water, but there's you still connect. You stand up again and you continue, and that is how I train. It's just within that bigger context. So I would say, like, it's fun to be in the ocean and to use your device to learn the techniques and to have a plan to how to do these things. But of course you fall down, and then it's part of this. It's part of the door of the way.
And as much, Thorsten, as much as you're saying, the being in the ocean is very fun, but it is surfing and actually meeting the ocean is scary as hell. Yeah. It's really it just is dangerous, and it's scary, and you can feel yourself confronting something much larger and being in a state of relationship with it. And of course, it's extraordinarily enjoyable. It is fun. But there's something deeper, which I think is what you were pointing to, Miriam, and that we all recognize in the practice, is this depth of confronting oneself and confronting the world in a way that we are surfing it rather than fighting it. Well, I think we're a little bit, few minutes over time, and it's been a wonderful sharing both with Miles and in his limited capacity, and Thorsten. This is the first time we're doing a conference call together, and I've really appreciated your enthusiasm in making this happen, as well as being the host for this the Aikido sessions that is coming up. Would you like to say something a little bit more about the event so that people can know where to go in order to get more information?
Look at our website, aikidosessions.de. There is all the information. Miriam made a good job there. Thank you, Miriam, for doing this. And it will take place Friday, 30th of November, right? So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we'll be
November 30, January 1 and 2, I think, or December 1.
December. It's November, the beginning of December, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in Offenbach, but this is so we have no idea. Actually, at least I have no idea how it will show. But maybe it's similar to this, this call, to this community call. So things are. I think let's come back to that idea of surfing the wave. So if you start, so then of course things happen. So and that's how I love this. This is then the third Aikido sessions. We started in 2014, 16. And then in 18 will be the third one. It's the idea is really that the things show up in the very moment. It's here and now and all together. And if we are kind of courageous enough all together to open up and to connect and to that stream of kind of holistic consciousness, which is kind of then showing up in that very moment. So there will be a session. I mean, it's kind of pointing a little bit to the jazz movement. So kind of improving in that moment, not to repeat yourself or ourselves. So this is the general idea.
Beautiful. Looking forward to it. So it's on November 8th, and it'll be around the same time. You'll get an email for it. So
great.
So stay tuned. And I want to thank Patrick, and I want to thank Thorsten and everybody who showed up. Terry, Aneta, Hung, Martin, Thorsten, Renate, Michael, Carl, Miriam, and Mandy, and for all those watching the video. Pardon my family Aikido. But Patrick, you want to? I'm going to close my mic. You want to close this?
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, just want to say thank you to everybody, and look forward to our next call on November 8th, same time, from my understanding. Thank you, Thorsten.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.